we talked about Syria earlier, half the population
Right.
is displaced.
Yes.
You're talking about, 12, 13 million people either internally displaced or have fled. Just unimaginable.
Unimaginable. And it's one of the biggest controversies in this country in terms of what to do when the refugees come. What do you do? Some countries are taking them in with open arms. Some countries are not. And there's a lot of people that are concentrating on the negative aspects of taking these people into your community. What is your take on watching all this thing happen? Watching all this take place?
I spent Friday and Saturday in Houston with a group of Afghan interpreters who I'd been with in Afghanistan, who got these special immigrant visas and came to America with their families. I cannot think of a better group of people who are contributing to life here. I mean, on the Saturday morning they were running a food bank. They've got jobs. They're paying taxes. I mean, I think we should welcome them with open arms. And I think, despite our moral obligation to do that, I think we would benefit from doing it. And, we turned away Jewish refugees during World War II. You'd think we'd learn from that and say, never again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an American Christian, I think Christianity is fairly clear on what to do with refugees.
Yes.
So to not only say no to refugees, but also to vilify them and say, oh, look, a lot of them are fighting age males.
Yes.
They're clearly ISIS sneaking in. I mean, that's a level of viciousness and ignorance that I just can't fathom.
The ignorance is, it's very pervasive, right? It's like, it's one of these things where you don't know. You're reading these stories, and these people are telling you that these are fighting age males, and that we could very well be letting ISIS into our country. We very well could be letting in these terrorist cells and allowing them to come in, but we also could be letting families in. That this is a country that's made of immigrants. I mean, it's one of the weirdest things in this country that this is a country so obsessed with borders and immigration, but yet it's comprised entirely of immigrants.
Yeah. There's a great, do you know Gary Young, the British journalist?
No.
He interviews Richard Spencer.
Oh.
And Richard Spencer, Gary Young, I think, makes a very similar point. And Richard Spencer says, but this country was built by white people. We came up with he said, no, it was literally built by black people. Gary Young says. He says, but only because we told them how to do it. And it's on camera. Gary Young says, you know what? I came to see you because I thought you were the intellectual argument for supporting Trump. So I thought I might learn
Richard
something.
Spencer was the
He did,
intellectual Why did he think that?
I don't know. But he says, you're not. This is just ridiculous. And he just shuts down the interview, turns around and walks off.
Well, good for him. I don't know anything about Richard Spencer other than he always gets mentioned as a white supremacist. I literally don't know what he stands for, or what he does, or what he says.
And they always say he's well-dressed and with a nice haircut. Yeah.
This is it's just such a crazy subject. The idea of, I mean, it would be nice if the whole world was up to the same standards of health and prosperity, and you didn't have to worry about where you could go. If the whole world was essentially like the United States, where you could go to where the good parts were. Like if you live in Detroit and you save up your money, you can move to Florida or wherever you want to go. I mean, you can do that. This is the beautiful thing about living inside of a country. It would be fantastic if the whole world was like that. You could just kind of go wherever you would prosper and wherever things would be well. But the thing about refugees in other countries where we don't understand their language or their culture, and then you get scared because you hear that they're Muslims and we're worried about Muslim terrorists, and it's one more piece of information that just overwhelms you. One more thing to concentrate on.
There is a difference with Muslims in the Catholic Church and child abuse scandal.
Yes.
Did a lot of people say, therefore all Christians are suspicious and all Christians are secretly pedophiles?
Right.
But they're just not telling us.
No.
They didn't.
But
they do with Muslims.
Well, it's fear of the unknown, It's a lot of it. The languages and the fact that we're, there's also there has to be this feeling that we've invaded their country, several countries, and been there for a long time. And there's a deep-seated resentment that, there's the thought of every time you accidentally blow up a wedding party with a drone, every time you kill civilians, anytime there's any collateral damage, you're creating untold numbers of people that hate the United States.
You'd think that having traveled to most of those countries, I don't see that. And yesterday I was interviewing the Afghan interpreters, and I said, "What do you think about negotiating with the Taliban?" I mean, in one case, a good friend of mine called Sarosh, who's now living in Houston, I said, these guys killed your brother because you were working for the Americans as an interpreter. So how do you feel about the Americans now doing a deal with the Taliban? And what about if the US leaves and the Taliban finishes off the government and then comes after your family? He said, you know what? America's not going to let that happen. America has so much power and knows what to do that they will make sure that any agreement they reach with the Taliban will be enforceable and it will be safe. He had so much faith. Far more than me.
Wow.
And that's what I hear far more often than the opposite.
Does that really depend on where you go? I mean, because if you go certain places, people have a lot of faith in Trump. You know? Like Donald Trump's going to protect us from evil. There's places where you go that...
I mean, it's become a cliche, but I do think you'll find a lot of places critical of American foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean they're critical of America.
And how do they parse that out?
Vietnam, I think, is a good example.
Right.
We have defeated communism, or communism has been defeated in Vietnam, just because the new generation grow up and think Western culture, communism. I know which one I want. It's a simple choice.
Yeah.
And I think that young generation is making that very simple choice. And it could just mean democracy.
And you think that is in Afghanistan as well?
Yeah.
That they're recognizing that Western culture provides more freedom and more economic opportunity, more prosperity.
Yeah. And I haven't heard, apart from the Taliban, I haven't heard much anti-American feeling in Afghanistan at all.
Really?
And also a lot of that, maybe I'm biased because a lot of the people I'm talking to had interactions with Americans.
Mm-hmm.
But they would even say as many mistakes as were made in the prosecuting of the war with airstrikes and night raids and all that, the American soldiers and Marines we met, we knew were good people. And it, like I said with Throach, my interpreter, it's incredible how many people still believe that to this day.